My name is Theodore Reynolds, and until 6 months ago, I was just another 38-year-old IT consultant living in Sacramento. I had a comfortable downtown apartment, a decent job at a tech firm in the business district, and a normal life. I enjoy hiking in the nearby wilderness on weekends, have a cat named Darwin, and occasionally meet friends for drinks at local breweries. Nothing about me would make you look twice if we passed on the street. That's what makes what happened so much harder to explain or believe. I'm documenting this now because I need someone to know the truth. The authorities think I'm suffering from trauma-induced delusions. My friend suggests therapy, and my sister has offered to let me stay with her in Oregon until I get better. But I'm not crazy. What's happening in Sacramento is real, and it's far more terrifying than anything you could imagine. It started on a Tuesday night in late October. The weather had turned unusually cold for Northern California, and a heavy fog had settled over the city, shrouding the streets in an opaque mist that diffused the streetlights into hazy orbs. I was working late, finishing a project deadline, and decided to walk home instead of taking an Uber. The streets were quiet, eerily so, but I'd made this walk hundreds of times before. I cut through McKinley Park as I often did, following the familiar path beneath the ancient oak trees that line the walkway. Their twisted branches formed dark silhouettes against the night sky, reaching out like skeletal fingers. The usual ambient noises of the city seemed muffled by the fog, creating an unsettling silence broken only by my footsteps on the damp pavement. Halfway through the park, I heard something, a rustling in the bushes to my left, followed by what sounded like heavy breathing. I paused, peering into the darkness. The fog made visibility nearly impossible beyond a few feet. "Hello?" I called out, immediately regretting the decision. My voice sounded small and vulnerable in the empty park. No response. Just that breathing. Deep, rhythmic, but somehow wrong. Not human, not any animal I recognized. I quickened my pace, suddenly aware of how isolated I was. The path ahead seemed longer than I remembered, the exit from the park impossibly distant. Then I heard it, a low growl that raised the hair on my arms and sent ice through my veins. I didn't look back. Some primal instinct told me that turning around would be a fatal mistake. Instead, I ran, my dress shoes slipping on the wet pavement, my laptop bag thumping awkwardly against my side. The growl transformed into a sound I still hear in my nightmares. A hybrid of a wolf's howl and something more guttural, more human. It echoed through the park, seeming to come from everywhere at once. I reached the park exit, breathing hard, and only then risked a glance behind me. Nothing was there, at least nothing I could see through the fog, but I could feel eyes on me, predatory and patient. I made it home in record time, locking the door behind me and collapsing onto my couch, trying to rationalize what had happened. Sacramento has coyotes that sometimes venture into the city parks at night. That must have been it, a coyote, made more threatening by the fog and my own exhaustion. But deep down, I knew that wasn't true. The next morning, I checked the local news while drinking my coffee. There was a small story about a homeless man found dead in McKinley Park. The report was vague. Signs of animal attack, authorities investigating. I stared at my phone screen, coffee growing cold, as a chill ran through me. I had been there in that park just hours before. I went to work, tried to focus, but my mind kept returning to the sounds I'd heard, the feeling of being watched. That evening, I took an Uber home, avoiding the park. 3 days later, another attack. This time, a jogger on the American River Trail, just north of downtown. Authorities believe it may be the same animal responsible for the McKinley Park incident, the news reported. They advise residents to avoid isolated areas after dark and to report any unusual animal sightings. The city was starting to notice something was wrong. Online forums buzzed with speculation: mountain lion, feral dogs, even a bear that had somehow wandered into the urban area. The more sensational posts suggested something more sinister, but these were quickly dismissed as fear-mongering. A week passed without incident, and the city began to relax. I didn't. I kept seeing shadows move at the corner of my vision, kept hearing that strange breathing in quiet moments. I stopped sleeping well, developed a jumpiness that colleagues commented on. "You look like hell, Theo," my boss told me one morning. Whatever's eating you, deal with it or take some time off. I chose to deal with it by investigating. Something wasn't adding up about these animal attacks. I started by visiting the library, researching local wildlife, attack patterns, anything that might explain what was happening. Nothing matched. The attacks were too calculated, the victims too specifically chosen, isolated individuals in predictable locations. Then I found the pattern. Both attacks had occurred during the full moon. It was such a cliché that I laughed out loud in the quiet library, earning a stern look from the elderly librarian. Werewolves weren't real. I was letting my imagination run wild, connecting dots that weren't there. But I couldn't shake the feeling. I dug deeper, looking into Sacramento's history, searching for similar incidents in the past. And I found them, dating back decades. Clusters of unexplained animal attacks. Always during the full moon, always in the same areas of the city, always eventually dismissed and forgotten when they stopped as mysteriously as they began. The next full moon was approaching, November 13th, just 2 days away. If the pattern held, whatever was out there would hunt again. I decided to do something spectacularly stupid. I was going to try to document it, to get proof. I purchased a digital camera with night vision capabilities, a high-powered flashlight, and pepper spray. I told myself it was just for protection, just in case I encountered a dangerous animal. But I knew I was preparing to face something far worse. On the night of the full moon, I positioned myself near the American River Trail, in a spot with good visibility, but plenty of trees for cover. I arrived before sunset, settling in to wait, camera ready. The hours passed slowly. The moon rose, casting silver light across the water. Midnight came and went. Nothing. I was beginning to think I'd been wrong about everything when I heard it. That same breathing I'd heard in the park. Close. Too close. I froze, fingers tightening on my camera. A figure emerged from the trees across the clearing. A man, walking with an odd, stilted gait. He paused, seeming to sniff the air, then continued toward the river path where late-night joggers sometimes passed. I raised my camera, zooming in on him. There was something off about his proportions, the way he moved. He stopped suddenly, head jerking up, looking directly toward my hiding spot. In that moment, I knew I'd made a terrible mistake. Whatever sixth sense this thing had, it knew I was there. I watched, paralyzed, as it changed direction, moving toward me with deliberate steps. The camera captured what happened next. The man's body contorted, bones cracking audibly, even from my distance. His face elongated, teeth protruding as his jaw extended unnaturally. Clothes tore as his frame expanded, dark hair sprouting across his skin, hands transforming into clawed appendages. The transformation wasn't smooth or magical like in movies. It was grotesque, agonizing to witness. What stood there now was neither man nor wolf, but some horrific combination. Standing upright on bent, animal-like legs, covered in matted fur, with a face that retained just enough human features to make it unutterably wrong. Its eyes reflected the moonlight like a wild animal's, but held an intelligence that was terrifyingly human. I ran. I abandoned all pretense of stealth and ran for my life, crashing through the underbrush toward where I'd parked my car. Behind me, I heard it pursuing, not running, but loping in a steady rhythm that told me it wasn't exerting itself, wasn't worried about losing its prey. I reached my car, fumbling with the keys, dropping them, retrieving them with shaking hands. The creature emerged from the trees as I finally got the door open. It stood at the edge of the parking lot, watching me, not attacking, just observing, memorizing. I drove home with my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst. The camera was still clutched in my hand, and I realized I'd been recording the entire time. I had evidence. At home, I locked every door and window, then connected the camera to my laptop. The footage was dark but clear enough. It showed exactly what I'd seen. The transformation was undeniable. I uploaded the video to my cloud storage, then sent links to my email, my sister, and a couple of trusted friends, with a message to view it immediately. Then I called the police. They arrived within 20 minutes. 2 officers who listened to my story with increasingly skeptical expressions. I showed them the video. Nothing was there. Just blurry footage of trees and shadows, a distant figure that remained human, then me running and the camera shaking wildly. The transformation I'd witnessed so clearly was completely absent. "Sir, have you been drinking tonight?" one officer asked. "Or taking any substances?" added the other. I protested, checked the cloud version, my email. All the copies showed the same thing. No transformation, no creature. Just a normal man walking in the distance and my panicked flight. They left after taking a report, clearly considering me another Sacramento resident spooked by the recent animal attacks. One suggested I see a doctor about my anxiety. I spent the rest of the night reviewing the footage again and again, trying to understand what had happened. Had I imagined it? Was I having some kind of breakdown? The next morning brought news of another attack, a security guard at a warehouse near the American River. He'd survived but was in critical condition at UC Davis Medical Center. The attack had occurred just an hour after the police left my apartment. I went to the hospital claiming to be a cousin. They wouldn't let me see him, but a sympathetic nurse told me he'd been repeating the same thing since they brought him in, that he'd been attacked by a man who turned into a monster. That confirmation should have brought relief. Instead, it filled me with dread. Whatever this thing was, it could somehow manipulate electronic evidence of its existence. My camera had captured it. I'd seen the footage with my own eyes, but somehow it had been erased or altered. Over the next few weeks, I researched everything I could find about werewolf legends, focusing on elements that might be true. Silver bullets and full moons were familiar tropes, but I found other, more obscure references, abilities to cloud human perception, to remove traces of their existence, to recognize those who had seen them for what they were. The attack stopped after that night. The city relaxed again. Authorities attributed the incidents to a mountain lion that had likely moved on, and life returned to normal for everyone except me. Because I knew it wasn't gone, I could feel it watching me. Sometimes at night, I would see a figure standing across the street from my apartment building, just at the edge of the streetlight's glow. Never moving, never approaching, just watching. When I blinked or looked away, it would be gone. I changed my routines, varied my routes to work, started carrying silver items, a pendant, a ring, even a letter opener, feeling foolish but desperate for any protection. I installed new locks and security cameras at my apartment. The cameras would occasionally glitch, showing distorted images of my empty hallway or the street outside. Once I reviewed footage and saw a distorted, elongated figure standing directly in front of my door for 3 hours in the middle of the night. When I checked the door the next morning, deep scratches marred the wood just below the peephole. The next full moon came in December. I barricaded myself in my apartment, windows covered, doors locked and barred. Outside, a winter storm battered Sacramento, unusual in its intensity. The power went out across my neighborhood around midnight. In the darkness, I heard scratching at my door, then at the windows. Soft at first, then more insistent. A low growl penetrated the howling wind. I huddled in my bathroom, the most interior room, clutching my silver letter opener and praying for morning. The scratching stopped suddenly. Silence fell, more terrifying than the noises had been. Then a voice, a rough approximation of human speech, like someone unused to forming words, called my name through the door. "Theodore," it rasped. "I know you. I know what you saw." I remained silent, frozen with terror. "You cannot hide from me," it continued. "This is my territory, my hunting ground. You are mine now." The voice was followed by a sound like laughter, but distorted, wrong, a human sound filtered through an inhuman throat. Then silence again. I didn't leave the bathroom until daylight. When I finally emerged, my apartment door showed no signs of scratching. The security cameras had recorded nothing but empty hallways during the night. But on my welcome mat lay a dead rat, its body torn precisely in half. I called in sick to work and spent the day researching, planning. This thing, this werewolf, for lack of a better term, was intelligent, methodical, and fixated on me. It could have killed me multiple times but chose not to. It was playing with me. The traditional werewolf lore suggested these creatures were once human, transformed by curse or bite. If that was true, then this thing had a human identity in Sacramento. It lived among us, walked the same streets, perhaps even had a job and friends. It only transformed during the full moon, which gave me time to try to identify it before the next cycle. I created a map of all the attack locations, going back through news archives to include the historical incidents I discovered. They clustered in certain areas: McKinley Park, the American River Trail, and the Warehouse District along the river. The pattern suggested the creature had a territory, likely centered somewhere within that triangle. I started spending my days off walking those areas, taking photographs of everyone I encountered, building a database of faces. It was tedious, probably illegal, and definitely creepy, but I was beyond caring about social norms. I was hunting the thing that was hunting me. Weeks passed. The December full moon came and went, this time with no attacks reported, though I barricaded myself in a hotel room across town just to be safe. January brought heavy rains to Sacramento, flooding parts of the American River Parkway and keeping people indoors. The werewolf, if it was still active, had no easy prey, except me. I still felt watched, still caught glimpses of a figure following me at a distance. Sometimes at night, my phone would ring with no caller ID, and I'd hear only breathing on the other end before the call disconnected. In early February, I had a breakthrough. Reviewing my photographs and cross-referencing with property records, I identified 7 men who lived within the territory pattern and matched the general build of the figure I'd seen that night by the river. One in particular caught my attention: Daniel Mercer, a night shift supervisor at the same warehouse where the security guard had been attacked. I began following him, turning the tables on my stalker. Mercer lived alone in a small house near the river, drove a nondescript sedan, and kept to himself. His neighbors knew little about him, describing him as quiet and private when I questioned them under the guise of being a census worker. The February full moon was approaching. I prepared more carefully this time, purchased a gun and silver bullets from a specialty ammunition maker online, though I had no idea if the silver would actually make any difference. I practiced shooting at a range outside the city, becoming comfortable with the weapon. I wasn't planning to kill Mercer, just to protect myself while gathering definitive proof. 3 nights before the full moon, I broke into Mercer's house while he was at work. I planted tiny cameras in his living room, bedroom, and the basement, which I found peculiarly reinforced with heavy steel doors and windowless walls. A large cage stood in one corner, with restraints inside that could only be fastened and unfastened from the outside. Evidence that Mercer knew what he was and tried to contain it during transformations? I waited for the full moon on February 10th, watching the live camera feeds from my laptop. Mercer returned home from work around 7 a.m., looking exhausted. He ate breakfast while watching the morning news, which included a report about increased police patrols due to the anniversary of the animal attacks from the previous fall. He smiled at this, a cold, knowing expression that sent chills through me even through the screen. As sunset approached, Mercer went to the basement. The camera showed him methodically removing his clothes, folding them neatly on a shelf, then entering the cage and securing his arms and legs in the restraints using an elaborate system of pulleys he could operate from inside. Once secured, he settled back against the wall, closed his eyes, and waited. The moon rose. I watched, breathless, for the transformation. Nothing happened. Mercer sat in the cage for hours, occasionally shifting position as much as his restraints allowed, but remaining entirely human. Around 3 a.m., he used the pulley system to release himself, dressed, and went upstairs to bed. I was wrong. Mercer wasn't the werewolf. He was hunting it too. The cage, the restraints. He was testing himself each full moon, believing he might be infected. The basement was his precaution, his way of ensuring he wouldn't hurt anyone if he did transform. I had wasted a month following the wrong person, and now the real werewolf was still out there, still hunting, still watching me. Dismayed, I shut down the camera feeds and tried to sleep. When I woke the next morning, 3 missing person reports dominated the local news, all individuals last seen near the American River after midnight. The werewolf had claimed more victims while I watched the wrong man. I was removing the cameras from Mercer's house that evening when I heard the front door open. Trapped in the basement, I hid behind the cage as footsteps descended the stairs. Mercer entered, immediately sensing something wrong. His eyes scanned the room, nostrils flaring slightly. He moved differently than when I'd observed him on camera. More fluid, more alert. "I know you're here," he said quietly. "I can smell you, Theodore." My blood turned to ice. I hadn't told anyone I was investigating Mercer. I hadn't spoken to him or introduced myself. Yet he knew my name. He continued, still in that soft, dangerous voice. "You've been watching me, following me. Did you think I wouldn't notice? Did you think I couldn't sense your fear?" He moved toward my hiding spot with unnatural grace. "You were clever, hiding your scent among many places, changing your routines. It made the hunt more interesting, but not clever enough to realize what was happening." I clutched my gun, loaded with silver bullets, but my hand shook so badly I wasn't sure I could aim. "The cage isn't to protect others from me, Theodore. It's to protect me from them, from the real monster that hunts in Sacramento. The one that wants to claim this territory for itself." He was at the cage now, running his fingers along the bars. "I was attacked 3 months ago, survived somehow. Each full moon, I wait to change, but it hasn't happened. I'm not the one you need to fear." He turned directly toward my hiding spot, eyes reflecting the dim basement light like a predator's. "But I know who is, and now so do you." I stepped out, gun raised. "What are you talking about?" Mercer smiled, a genuine expression of pity. "Think, Theodore. Who has been close to you this whole time? Who knew your routines, your habits? Who could access and alter your video evidence? Who would have a particular interest in keeping you confused and afraid, but alive?" The realization hit me like a physical blow. There was only one person who had that kind of access to my life, who knew about my investigation, who had the technical skills to manipulate digital evidence. My boss, Alan Kincaid, the man who told me I looked like hell after the first attacks, who had access to all my cloud accounts through our company's IT systems, who lived in a luxury condo overlooking McKinley Park. "Kincaid," I whispered. Mercer nodded. "He's been established here for years, claiming victims during each cycle, but careful enough to space them out, to make them look like animal attacks or disappearances. He sensed me as a potential rival after I was attacked. And you are getting too close to the truth. Why are you telling me this? Why help me?" "Because I need your help in return," Mercer replied. "Silver doesn't work. That's a myth. Werewolves can be killed, but only by massive trauma that prevents regeneration. Decapitation, complete destruction of the heart. I've been preparing, studying him, but I can't take him alone, especially not when he's transformed." I lowered the gun slightly. "You want us to kill my boss?" "I want us to kill a monster that has murdered dozens of people and will continue killing unless stopped. The next full moon is March 12th. We have a month to prepare." That month passed in a blur of preparation. Mercer and I formed an uneasy alliance, sharing information and resources. He had military experience I lacked, while I had access to Kincaid's schedule and habits through work. We devised a plan to confront him before the transformation, when he would be vulnerable but still dangerous. The day before the March full moon, I did something incredibly risky. I invited Kincaid to my apartment to discuss a major project development. He accepted with what seemed like genuine enthusiasm. Mercer was hidden in my bedroom, armed with tranquilizers and restraints. The plan was to incapacitate Kincaid, secure him in Mercer's basement cage, and then, well, that part remained morally gray. Could we really execute him, even knowing what he was? We had decided to cross that bridge when we came to it. Kincaid arrived precisely on time, bringing expensive whiskey as a gift. "You've seemed distracted lately, Theo," he said as I took his coat. "I'm glad you reached out. I've been concerned." His concern seemed sincere, his manner relaxed and friendly as always. For a moment, I doubted everything. What if Mercer was wrong? What if this was all an elaborate setup? "Let's have a drink," I suggested, leading him to the living room. We sat, discussed work briefly, and I waited for Mercer's signal, a text message that would tell me to get out of the way. "Actually, Theo," Kincaid said after a few minutes, setting down his untouched whiskey, "I know why I'm really here." My phone buzzed. Mercer's signal. Kincaid moved with blinding speed, grabbing my wrist and twisting until I cried out in pain. "Did you think I wouldn't smell him?" he hissed, his face inches from mine, features already beginning to elongate, though the full moon was still hours away. "Did you think I wouldn't know you were conspiring with the interloper?" Mercer burst from the bedroom, firing the tranquilizer gun. The dart hit Kincaid's shoulder, but he merely snarled and ripped it out, throwing it aside. He maintained his grip on my wrist, using me as a shield. "Daniel Mercer," Kincaid said, voice deepening into a growl. "The one who got away. I should have torn your throat out when I had the chance." Mercer kept the gun trained on Kincaid, but couldn't risk another shot with me in the way. "Let him go, Kincaid. This is between us." "No," Kincaid replied. "It's between me and my territory. You're both trespassing." His fingers were extending into claws that dug into my arm, drawing blood. "I've been in Sacramento for 27 years, establishing my hunting grounds, culling the weak, remaining undetected. Then you stumble into my path, survive somehow, and start interfering. And Theodore here, my own employee, starts playing detective." I struggled, but his strength was inhuman. "You've been toying with me," I gasped, "all this time." "Of course," he said almost fondly. "You were so obvious, Theodore, so earnest in your investigation. Following me home that first week, searching werewolf legends on your work computer, installing those pathetic cameras. I had access to everything. Your accounts, your building's security system. I watched you watching me. It was amusing." "Then why not just kill me?" I demanded. Something like regret crossed his distorting features. "You were a good employee, reliable, competent. I thought perhaps you'd make a good pack member instead. The transformation process requires preparation of the victim, fear, prolonged terror, the knowledge of what's coming. I've been conditioning you for months." Mercer inched closer. "You're outnumbered, Kincaid. The transformation isn't complete yet. You can't take both of us." Kincaid laughed, a sound that became increasingly inhuman as his chest expanded, tearing his expensive dress shirt. "I don't need the full transformation to kill you both." What happened next occurred so quickly it remains a blur in my memory. Kincaid threw me aside with tremendous force. I crashed into my bookshelf, the impact knocking the breath from my lungs. Mercer fired the tranquilizer gun repeatedly, most darts finding their mark. But Kincaid kept advancing, his body contorting, skin splitting as the creature inside emerged. Mercer abandoned the tranquilizer and drew a hunting knife, slashing at Kincaid's partially transformed face. The cut healed almost instantly, but it gave me time to scramble for my gun, loaded with regular bullets, not silver. I knew now they wouldn't kill him, but they might slow him down. I fired twice, hitting him in the back. He whirled toward me, his face now a horrific blend of human and wolf, blood matting the fur that had erupted across his skin. His clothes hung in tatters from his enlarged frame. "Run!" Mercer shouted at me, plunging his knife into Kincaid's side. "Get out now!" I hesitated, unwilling to abandon Mercer. That hesitation nearly cost me my life as Kincaid lunged toward me, jaws snapping. Mercer tackled him from behind, and they crashed into my coffee table, shattering it. They fought with terrible ferocity, Mercer with his knife, desperately slashing at vital areas, Kincaid with claws and teeth that could tear through flesh like paper. Blood spattered across my apartment, some of it bubbling with a strange black substance where it came from Kincaid. I continued firing, trying to aim for Kincaid's head and heart, but the bullets seemed to cause only momentary pain before he recovered. His transformation was accelerating, his humanity falling away as the monster emerged fully. Mercer was losing, his movements slowing, as blood loss took its toll. Kincaid's claws had opened deep gashes across his chest and arms. With a final, desperate effort, Mercer drove his knife upward under Kincaid's jaw, aiming for the brain. Kincaid howled, a sound that shattered my windows and probably alerted the entire building. He staggered backward, clawing at the knife embedded in his skull, but still didn't fall. I used the distraction to grab Mercer, pulling him toward the door. "We have to go! We can't kill him!" Mercer could barely stand, but adrenaline kept him moving. We stumbled into the hallway as Kincaid extracted the knife from his head with a sickening sound of metal scraping bone. We made it to the elevator just as Kincaid burst through my apartment door, now fully transformed into the creature I'd seen by the river. 8 feet tall, muscle-bound, covered in dark fur, with a wolf-like head atop a body that still retained horrifically human elements. The elevator doors closed seconds before he reached us. As we descended, alarm sirens began wailing throughout the building. Someone had called emergency services. "My car!" Mercer gasped, clutching his wounds. "Underground garage. We need to get away before police." I supported him to the parking garage, helped him into his sedan, and drove out just as police cars began arriving at the building's entrance. We had minutes at most before they discovered the scene in my apartment and began a manhunt. "Where do we go?" I asked, speeding away from downtown. "Cabin," Mercer managed, his voice weak. "Outside Auburn?" Prepared it for something like this. Directions in my phone. I followed the GPS directions into the foothills northeast of Sacramento, constantly checking the rearview mirror for pursuit, either from police or something worse. Mercer was fading in and out of consciousness, his injuries severe. The cabin was isolated, reached by a dirt road through dense forest. Inside, Mercer directed me to medical supplies, far more extensive than a typical first aid kit. He talked me through cleaning and suturing his worst wounds, procedures I performed with shaking hands. "Will he track us here?" I asked as I worked. Mercer nodded weakly. "Eventually, but the place is ready. Reinforced doors, weapons." "Ready for what?" "We just saw that bullets don't stop him, knives don't stop him. What exactly is your plan?" He gestured toward a chest in the corner. "Open it." Inside, I found explosives, C4, detonators, remote triggers, military-grade equipment that Mercer definitely shouldn't have had access to. "Jesus," I breathed. "You were planning this all along." "Last resort," he confirmed. "If we can't kill it conventionally, we obliterate it completely. No heart, no brain, no regeneration, but needed to get it here first." "So we're bait," I realized. "You want Kincaid to follow us here so you can blow him up. Along with us too, I'm guessing?" Mercer managed a pained smile. "Not necessarily. Remote detonators. Might get away. Might not. Better than letting it continue hunting." I wasn't convinced, but we had few options. Kincaid knew who we were, where we lived. The police would be looking for us after discovering my blood-soaked apartment, and tonight was the full moon. Kincaid would be at his most powerful and most vicious. We barricaded ourselves in the cabin, setting up the explosives at Mercer's direction. His military training was evident in the precision of his instructions, even through his pain. By sunset, the entire cabin was rigged to become a firestorm at the press of a button. Night fell. The full moon rose, casting silver light through the cabin's windows. We waited in tense silence, Mercer resting to conserve his strength, me keeping watch with one of his rifles, loaded with regular ammunition I knew would be largely ineffective. Hours passed. Midnight came and went. Had Kincaid been captured by police, killed somehow? Or was he simply biding his time, waiting for us to lower our guard? At 2:17 a.m., we heard it, a low, throaty howl in the distance, answered by another, closer howl. "There's 2 of them?" I whispered in horror. Mercer struggled to sit up. "No, not possible. Werewolves are solitary, territorial. They don't form packs." The howling continued, seeming to come from different directions now. 3-4 distinct voices calling to each other in the night. "Unless," Mercer said slowly, "he's been building one, converting victims who survived, like me, preparing them over time." "A werewolf pack," I breathed, "with Kincaid as the alpha." "If that's true," Mercer said grimly, "the explosives won't be enough. We need to separate them, deal with them one by one." "How?" "We're trapped in here." A crash against the front door interrupted us, something large and powerful hurling itself against the reinforced wood. It held, but a splintering crack appeared near the hinges. "Back door," Mercer ordered, grabbing a detonator. "I'll hold them here. Buy you time." "I'm not leaving you to die." "Not asking you to," he said. "Get to my truck. Keys under the seat. There's a cache of weapons in the toolbox. Circle around, pick me up on the north side in exactly 3 minutes." Another crash against the door, harder this time. The crack widened. I hesitated, then nodded. 3 minutes. Don't you dare be late. I slipped out the back door into the moonlit forest. The night was alive with sounds. Growls, howls, the cracking of branches under heavy footfalls. They were surrounding the cabin. I ran for Mercer's truck, parked about 50 yards away, staying low and moving as quietly as possible. Behind me, I heard the cabin door finally give way, followed by Mercer's shouts and gunfire. I reached the truck, found the keys, and started the engine. The toolbox in the bed contained exactly what he'd promised: military-grade weapons, including a flamethrower. I drove the truck around to the north side of the cabin, counting down the seconds. Explosions rocked the night, Mercer triggering smaller charges inside to keep the werewolves at bay. When I reached the rendezvous point, Mercer burst from the trees, blood streaming from fresh wounds across his face and shoulder. He threw himself into the passenger seat. "Drive! Now!" I floored the accelerator, tires spinning on dirt before catching. In the rearview mirror, dark shapes emerged from the cabin, at least 4 of them, running on all 4s with unnatural speed. "The detonator," Mercer gasped, fumbling in his jacket. "The main charges." He pressed the button. The night turned to day as the cabin exploded in a massive fireball, the concussion rocking the truck even as we sped away. Trees near the cabin caught fire, the beginnings of a forest fire that would draw authorities within hours. "Did we get them?" I asked, navigating the treacherous forest road at dangerous speed. Mercer twisted to look behind us. "Maybe some. Not all. Keep driving." I pushed the truck to its limits, swerving around curves, bouncing through ruts. The headlights caught flashes of movement in the forest alongside us, shapes running parallel to the road, keeping pace effortlessly. "They're hurting us," Mercer realized, "driving us somewhere." "Where? Why not just attack? Kincaid wants you alive, remember? To join his pack. The others are following his orders." The realization chilled me. "How many do you think there are?" I counted 5 distinct howls. Kincaid must have been building this pack for years, keeping them hidden, dormant until needed. The road ahead was blocked suddenly by a massive fallen tree. I slammed on the brakes, the truck skidding to a stop just short of collision. "Trap," Mercer said tersely, grabbing weapons from the back. "We're on foot from here." We abandoned the truck, arming ourselves with whatever we could carry. Mercer took a shotgun and the flamethrower. I carried a rifle and as much ammunition as my pockets would hold. We plunged into the forest, away from the road, hoping to lose our pursuers in the dense undergrowth. It was hopeless. The werewolves knew the territory, could see in the dark, could smell our fear and blood. We heard them circling, their movements deliberate, unhurried, predators confident in their hunt. "We need higher ground," Mercer said. "Somewhere defensible." We climbed, finding a rocky outcropping that offered some protection, steep on 3 sides, our backs to a cliff wall. If they came, it would be from one direction. They came from all directions. They scaled the near vertical rock faces with ease, emerging from the shadows like nightmares made flesh. 5 of them, as Mercer had counted. 4 subordinates and, in the center, the largest. Kincaid, recognizable even in his monstrous form by the half-healed wound under his jaw where Mercer had stabbed him. Mercer fired the flamethrower, creating a wall of fire between us and them. They retreated temporarily, snarling at the flames, but the fuel wouldn't last long. "Any last brilliant plans?" I asked, aiming my rifle at the nearest werewolf. "Just one," Mercer replied, his voice oddly calm. "They want you alive, Theo. Not me. I'm just a rival to be eliminated. Use that." Before I could ask what he meant, Mercer charged forward through the flames, flamethrower spewing fire directly at Kincaid. The werewolf alpha howled in pain and rage as his fur caught fire, but he didn't retreat. Instead, he met Mercer's charge head-on, massive claws tearing through the flamethrower's fuel tank. The explosion was smaller than the cabin, but no less devastating at close range. Mercer and Kincaid disappeared in a ball of flame. The other werewolves scattered, momentarily disoriented by the flash and the loss of their alpha's commands. I used the confusion to run, scrambling down the other side of the outcropping, away from where the pack had assembled. Behind me through the smoke, I heard agonized howling. Kincaid, Mercer, or both, I couldn't tell. I ran blindly through the forest, no destination in mind except away. The eastern sky was lightening, dawn approaching. Would the werewolves retreat with daylight? The full moon's power would wane, but would that be enough? I hadn't gone half a mile when I heard them pursuing again. Fewer now, perhaps 3 sets of footfalls. The explosion had taken some of them out, at least temporarily. My lungs burned, my legs trembled with exhaustion. I couldn't outrun them, couldn't hide from their senses. As the forest thinned, I found myself on the edge of a ravine, a river rushing 20 feet below, trapped. I turned to face my pursuers, rifle raised. 3 werewolves emerged from the trees, approaching slowly now, cautiously. Without Kincaid, they seemed less coordinated, but no less deadly. One of them, a smaller, leaner creature with reddish fur, stepped forward, lips pulled back from fangs in what might have been a smile. It spoke, the words mangled but intelligible. "Theodore, no escape. Join us." "Never," I said, backing toward the ravine edge. "Pain first," it continued, advancing. "Always pain first, then change." The choice became clear. Be torn apart and transformed into one of them, or take my chances with the river below. I chose the river. I turned and jumped, their howls of frustration following me down. The cold water hit like concrete, driving the breath from my lungs. The current grabbed me immediately, pulling me under, spinning me through rapids. I fought to the surface, gasping, glimpsing werewolves pacing along the ravine edge, unwilling to follow. The river carried me miles downstream before I managed to drag myself onto a rocky shore, hypothermic and battered but alive. As the sun rose fully, I wandered until I found a highway where a startled truck driver picked me up and drove me to the nearest hospital. I told the doctors I'd been hiking and fallen into the river. They treated me for exposure, cuts, and bruises, none of them life-threatening. When police came to question me about my apartment in Sacramento, I claimed no knowledge. I'd been camping for days, had no idea what they were talking about. They didn't believe me, of course, but without evidence connecting me directly to the blood and destruction, they eventually had to let me go. The cabin explosion was attributed to a meth lab accident after remains of chemicals and equipment were discovered in the wreckage. Evidence apparently planted to misdirect investigation. I left Sacramento that day and haven't returned. I've been moving constantly since then, never staying in one place longer than a few weeks. I changed my name, disconnected from everyone I knew in my previous life. Sometimes I think I've lost them, that they can't track me anymore. But then I see a figure standing across the street from my latest temporary accommodation, or I catch a familiar scent in a crowd. That distinctive odor of wet fur and something chemical, something wrong, and I know they're still hunting. I don't know if Kincaid survived the explosion. I don't know how many of his pack remain, but I know they won't stop until they find me. Each full moon, I lock myself away in whatever secure location I can find, watching for signs of transformation in myself. So far, nothing, but Mercer said he'd been attacked 3 months before showing symptoms. How long is the incubation period? Am I already infected? The change building slowly within me. I'm documenting all this now because the next full moon is only 2 days away. I've rented a storage unit with reinforced walls, installed my own restraint system similar to Mercer's. If I transform, I won't allow myself to become one of them, to hunt innocent people. And if I don't transform, I'll continue running, continue fighting. Because someone has to know the truth. Someone has to believe that monsters walk among us, wearing human faces, building their numbers in secret. The Night Stalker of Sacramento is real, and it has many faces now. If you're reading this and I've disappeared, don't look for me. But watch the shadows. Listen for sounds in the night that don't belong. And when the full moon rises, stay inside, doors locked, lights on. They're out there, hunting, waiting, growing stronger, and they're coming for us all.